Hey, welcome back to the show. The United States conducted a tremendously bold operation last night. They went into Caracas, Venezuela, captured Nicolás Maduro and his wife, who were both indicted here in the United States, and extracted them back here. Take a look.
Late last night and early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault. And it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolás Maduro to justice. This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history.
Now, I'm going to stop the video right there just so we can appreciate what just happened. An elite number of special forces operators went into a country, captured the president and his wife, extracted them out of the country just like that. They made the operation sound so simple, but the complexity is massive. Just imagine the amount of intelligence that had to be gathered before this operation was executed. Here's General Kane talking about that here.
After months of work by our intelligence teammates to find Maduro and understand how he moved, where he lived, where he traveled, what he ate, what he wore, what were his pets. In early December, our force was set pending a series of aligned events. Key was choosing the right day to minimize the potential for civilian harm and maximize the element of surprise and minimize the harm to the indicted personnel so, as the president said, they could be brought to justice.
Did you guys hear what he just said? He said that President Trump wanted minimal damage to the indicted personnel. In other words, he wanted them to go in and capture Maduro alive. How much easier would it have been to just strike Maduro and kill him on the spot? We knew exactly where he was. Our intelligence gathering operations and our assets are unmatched around the world. Let's listen to a little bit of the complexity of this operation.
Over the course of the night, aircraft began launching from 20 different bases on land and sea across the Western Hemisphere. In total, more than 150 aircraft, bombers, fighters, intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, rotary wing were in the air last night. Thousands and thousands of hours of experience were airborne. Our youngest crew member was 20, and our oldest crew member was 49. And there's simply no match for American military might.
Now let's go ahead and listen to how he was actually captured.
On arrival into the target area, the helicopters came under fire, and they replied with that fire with overwhelming force in self-defense. One of our aircraft was hit, but remained flyable, and as the president said earlier today, all of our aircraft came home, and that aircraft remained flyable during the rest of the mission. As the operation unfolded at the compound, our air and ground intelligence teams provided real-time updates to the ground force, ensuring those forces could safely navigate the complex environment without unnecessary risk. The force remained protected by overhead tactical aviation. Maduro and his wife, both indicted, gave up and were taken into custody by the Department of Justice, assisted by our incredible U.S. military with professionalism and precision, with no loss of U.S. life.
You know, the part that caught my attention out of that little clip was the fact that we took fire and we responded with overwhelming force. The general was talking about 150 military assets in place, either conducting the operation or in support of the operation. He also said that they had aviation assets overhead. A lot of those aviation assets probably had predetermined targets just in case they needed to engage in a little bit more destruction. And General Kane spoke about how they captured Maduro, but I like President Trump's description better. Take a listen.
President, you were one of the only people to watch this all play out live. What was Maduro doing when the U.S. forces entered what I assume would be his home? And also, was there any point where the U.S. was considering if Maduro pushed back or resisted killing Maduro?
It could have happened. It could have happened. He was trying to get into a safe place. You know, the safe place is all steel. And he wasn't able to make it to the door because our guys were so fast. They went through the opposition so fast. And there was a lot of opposition. You know, people were wondering, do we get them by surprise? Sort of surprised, but they were waiting for something. It was a lot of opposition. There was a lot of gunfire. You saw some of it today. But he was trying to get to his safe place, which wasn't safe because we would have had the door blown up in about 47 seconds, they say on average, regardless of how thick the steel was. It was a very thick door. It was a very heavy door, but he was unable to get to that door. He made it to the door. He was unable to close it.
And I guess Americans are probably asking themselves now, well, what do we do now? What happens next? Well, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, spoke to the Vice President. Take a look.
And then you also mentioned the Vice President of Venezuela. Are you going to work with the Vice President of Venezuela, or how do you foresee the relationship
Well,
going?
I understand she was just sworn in, but she was, as you know, picked by Maduro. So Marco's working on that directly. He just had a conversation with her, and she's essentially willing to do what we think is necessary to make Venezuela great again. Very simple.
So she's basically saying that she wants to make Venezuela great again. How awesome is that? I'm telling you, a lot of people don't understand the richness that exists in Venezuela. That country should be one of the richest in the Western Hemisphere. But the tyrants that have governed it have absolutely destroyed it. Now I'll tell you, that is a quick change of tune, because this is what she was saying this morning.
In the face of this brutal situation, and in the face of this brutal attack, we have no knowledge of the whereabouts of the President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Celia Flores. We demand from the Donald Trump government immediate proof of life for President Maduro and the First Lady. We demand respect for our international rights. We condemn this brutal way, savage aggression against our country that has taken the lives of military officials who will now become martyrs of our country, and that have taken the lives of innocent civilian Venezuelans in all the different attack locations, such as the capital, the Aragua state, the Miranda state, and the La Guaira state.
And look, the president has now said that he's not going to support the opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, coming back into power. And now that they've explained it, it makes perfect sense. And let me tell you guys why I think it makes sense. So what they're doing is they're taking a page from the after actions from the Iraq war. And what we essentially did was, when we went into Iraq, we completely dissolved the Ba'ath Party. We basically displaced Saddam's whole government. And that's not a smart idea, because what people need to understand is that people are in government and following that ruler, that tyrant, because of the fact that he is a tyrant, not necessarily because they agree with his policies. So once you remove the tyrant, that allows people to think for themselves, and in this case, enable democracy. So to me, it makes perfect sense that they're keeping the vice president in place, especially since she has already said that she's willing to do whatever it takes to make the country prosperous. Look, this situation is also different because Secretary Rubio is very savvy when it comes to international relations, and he has a tremendous understanding of how Latin America works. So this is different from Iraq in that sense as well, because in Iraq, we had a bunch of people who didn't have any type of cultural understanding, leading the charge and trying to make everything function. In this situation, we have a Secretary of State who is very familiar with Latin America and has worked with Latin America for decades. You know, another thing that we need to keep focus on is what's going to happen to Colombia and Petro. Petro is not going to be captured like Maduro. Remember, Petro was democratically elected by the Colombian people. That's not going to happen. I've thrown these numbers at you before, but 60% increase in production of cocaine in his first year in office. Over 50% increase in the production of cocaine in his second year in office. So it's obvious that he allows the production of cocaine in his country. So here's President Trump's take when he's asked about previously saying that Petro needs to watch his ass. Take a look.
Well, he has cocaine mills. He has factories where he makes cocaine. And yeah, I think I stick by my first statement. He's making cocaine. They're sending it into the United States. So he does have to watch his ass.
I think Petro needs to do a better job of reducing the amount of cocaine that's being produced in his country. And if he doesn't, the relationship with the United States is only going to sour over time. When it comes to governance here in the United States, I know that a question a lot of people are asking is, was Congress informed? Were they told about this operation? In operations like this, you can't necessarily inform Congress because there are certain triggers that will enable the operation. Take a look.
Mr. President, did you notify any members of Congress in advance?
Marco, do you want to talk about that? Because you were involved in it.
Sure. We called members of Congress immediately after. This was not the kind of mission that you can do congressional notification on. It was a trigger-based mission in which conditions had to be met night after night. We watched and monitored that for a number of days. So it's just simply not the kind of mission you can call people and say, hey, we may do this at some point in the next 15 days. But it's largely a law enforcement function. Remember, at the end of the day, at its core, this was an arrest of 2 indicted fugitives of American justice, And the Department of War supported the Department of Justice in that job. Now, there are broader policy implications here, but it's just not the kind of mission that you can pre-notify because it endangers the mission.
Plus, if I could add one thing to that, Congress has a tendency to leak. This would not be good. If they leaked, General, I think it would have been maybe a very different result.
Now, there was a question asked during this press briefing that I was very interested in hearing the answer for, and that was President Trump's pardon of former Honduran President Juan Hernandez. If you remember, Hernandez was extradited to the United States and convicted in 2024. He was basically rotting in prison here. Now take a look at President Trump's explanation on why he pardoned him.
You said that Maduro is responsible for drug trafficking. You recently pardoned the former president of Honduras who was convicted of many drug trafficking. Can you explain how these two situations are different? And would you ever pardon Maduro?
I endorsed, as you know, the winning president, the man who won in Honduras. I endorsed the man who won in Chile. I endorsed the man who won in Argentina. And we are doing very well with that whole group. What the man that I pardoned was, if you could equate it to us, he was treated like the Biden administration treated a man named Trump. That didn't work out too well for them. This was a man who was persecuted very unfairly. He was the head of the country. He was persecuted very unfairly. And there are a number of them. And we felt that it was a very unfair situation that happened to him. He's also a party member of the man who won. So obviously the people liked what I did. And one of the reasons that was done is because of the fact that the party in power felt very strongly that that man was treated very badly. I studied it very quickly, and then I studied it in great detail. I went to a lot of the people standing behind me, and they felt that that man was persecuted and treated very badly. That's why I gave him a pardon.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've got to agree with that reasoning. So he was basically singled out by the previous administration, treated completely unfairly, and the current party in power in Honduras supports this pardoning. So what the president is basically doing now is he's strengthening our relationships abroad by doing this pardon. Now, there are other people that I completely disagree with pardoning, but in this case, now that the president has come out and publicly stated why he did the pardon, it makes sense and I agree with it. Look, I think this serves as a message to the rest of the world. The United States is willing to do whatever it takes when it comes to national security. And I think the line of the night came from the Secretary of State when he said, if you don't know, now you know. Take a listen.
Everybody talks, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. When I get there, we're going to do this, we're going to take... This is a president of action. Like, I don't understand yet how they haven't figured this out. And now, if you don't know, now you know. Because this is the way it's going to play out. And I think people need to understand that this is not a president that just talks and does letters and press conferences. And, you know, if he says he's serious about something, he means it. And this is something that was a direct threat to the national interest of the United States. And the president addressed it. There's a president of peace, by the way. I told you what I just said earlier. This guy had multiple opportunities to find his way somewhere else and figure out another. He could have been living somewhere else right now very happy. But instead, he wanted to play big boy. And so now, you know, he's got other sets of problems on his hands.
Let's take a look at some of the scenes worldwide as people rejoice the fact that we took down the tyrant. You know, unfortunately for Maduro, he had an opportunity to go. President Trump said that he had a discussion with him and they gave him ample opportunity to leave. Unfortunately, he didn't do that. I'm sure he's regretting it now, just like the Secretary of State said. But I'm just so happy for the Venezuelan people because they can now rejoice in the fact that their country is going back to being a democracy. Okay, that's it for today. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more that comes out from this story. I'll try to bring it to you guys as I get it. Like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay balanced.